Have you been convinced that you need to drop $4,000 on a guitar amp? Well, I can get amazing results from a $183 Valve King and a dirt cheap Harley Benton cab from Germany. Don't believe me? Well, I can prove it 3 times over. These are the cheap amps that rival the Legends, the movie. I went behind Soldano's back to bring you the truth. The SLO 100, the legendary high-gain monster, costs $4,000 US brand new. But I found a real tube amp with a very similar high-gain sound for only $183. This isn't a joke, this isn't a prank. Let me show you how to find one and how it compares to the real thing. And yes, this amp delivers the goods without breaking the bank. How many times have you looked at an expensive amp and said to yourself, if only I had this, this would give me the ultimate tone? I know I have, many times. But the simple truth is we're a visual species. We tend to listen with our eyes. Impressive looking amps are enticing, and impressive looking amps with gigantic price tags are even that much more seductive. And the Soldano SLO 100? Well, it's got to be one of the most envy-inducing amps ever made. According to Wikipedia, Mike Soldano was modifying Mesa Boogie Mark IIs, and those became the inspiration for what would become the Super Lead Overdrive 100, one of the very first amps built with high gain in mind. And that amp became popular with players as wide-ranging as Eric Clapton, Mark Knopfler, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and George Lynch. The SLO 100 became Edward Van Halen's amp on the album For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, and his own signature amp, the 5150, was based off that as well. And then that amp went on to appear on some of my favorite records with some of the heaviest tones ever, such as Carcass's Heartwork and In Flames' Clayman. Now, I'm not going to mince words here, the SLO 100 is not cheap. Brand new, it'll cost you $4,000 at Sweetwater. Used? Well, you can get yourself a massive discount. Here's one for only $38.75, or one even cheaper at $38.50. And if you're looking for an original from the 90s or 2000s, well, hang on to your wallet because this is not gonna be pretty. The cheapest one I could find was going for $6,000! Looks like it used to belong to Warrior Soul. Cool band, never got anywhere near the recognition they deserved. I'd recommend checking out the album Last Decade, Dead Century, and the track The Wasteland. Here's another one that was owned by Richie Sambora that's going for only $9,995. Ouch. But wait, here's another in snakeskin that will set you back a cool $11,264.63. Holy fuck! Now ask yourself this, are these amps really going to give you a gigantic tone advantage? Of course not. This is all just smoke and mirrors fueled by greed. When you remove the labels and actually start listening with just your ears, suddenly the massive tone shift that you thought you'd get by spending a fortune tend to vanish. Isn't it amazing how much our perception changes once we label things? Now, there is a lot of great information online about recording guitar, but the sad truth is most of it really isn't applicable to metal. Tubes and pickups really don't do all that much once you put even a modest amount of gain on a signal. And the tone wood thing is just utter nonsense for high gain. Please do not fall for the marketing. Be smarter than that and save your money. In fact, the player doesn't even matter all that much. We learned that early on as it was one of the first tests I ever did on this show. And despite the massive protest in the comments, nobody has been able to disprove those findings in over a decade. Now let's be absolutely clear here. Recording metal guitar is its own discipline. Common knowledge about recording guitar does not apply. Now look, if you want to go cover Lay Down Sally and wow them at the old folks home, there are plenty of online echo chambers for you to get trapped in regarding that style. However, if you want to lay waste to the universe, it's a completely different world. Here's an inconvenient fact. When mic'd up, a lot of these amps sound rather similar. The metal community discovered this back around 2005 or 2006 on the Andy Sneap forum when guys started blending 5150s and rectifiers run through the same cabinet. There were a number of observations on just how similar they sounded once they were under a mic, and those threads are still there if you want to have a look. Here's the issue. Amps that can vary wildly in the room really don't sound all that different in a recording situation because you have to mic a speaker or use an impulse. And speakers and impulses impart wildly different frequency responses. And the microphone that you use to record the amp's sound is going to impart its own color as well. The SM57, arguably the world's most popular microphone for guitar cabinets, does not have a flat frequency response. It's got a very significant boost at 5 to 6 kilohertz, which adds a lot of treble to a guitar sound. And this is even before it hits a mixing console. Now keep in mind, guitar is a mid-range instrument. And in the context of a mix, we have to make space for the other instruments. Yes, Mr. Guitar Player, there are other instruments being recorded as well. It's not all about you. Here's the thing, engineers, we have to dump out most of the bottom end because that's where the bass guitar and the kick drum go. We have to leave room in the top end for the cymbals and the vocals. And the guitar past 10 kilohertz is just plain nasty to listen to. In a recording situation, we have to work with the amp's usable frequencies. And this is why speaker choice is so critical, because it is the ultimate governor of your guitar sound. Everything you do goes through the extremely complex filter that is your speaker. And this is what determines what your guitar sounds like in a mix. And this is also where guitar players tend to make critical mistakes when it comes to the perceived value of an amp, because different amps tend to ship with different speakers. The massive differences we hear from amp to amp are mostly due to speaker variances, speakers that the guitarist didn't bother to inquire about. Now, in my own experience in the early 90s, I remember being rather unimpressed with the 5150 amp when it first came out. I only learned many years later that it was mostly due to the PV Shitfield speaker that they insisted on loading into the PV cabinets. Try as you might, that turd is nearly impossible to record and have it sound good. But if you plug the 5150 into a cab loaded with great speakers, suddenly that amp became so much better. And yet guitar players still have a hard time comprehending this. In fact, I've lost count how many times I've watched a guitar player's eyes glaze over when I say, "Hey, cool guitar sound. What speakers were in that amp?" I swear, this is the real world equivalent of using the stupefy spell from Harry Potter. Because more often than not, they'll hit you back with, Celestians. That is, if they don't make fun of you for asking about their speakers, because, I mean, why in the world would those make any kind of difference? Once you learn this fundamental truth about speakers, suddenly finding a great guitar sound becomes infinitely easier. And it's way easier not only on your mental well-being, but your wallet as well. So, what am I using here that can sound like a Soldano and didn't even cost me $200? That's absolutely right. The humble 50-watt PV Valve King combo. Cue the "you just made the Soldano sound like shit on purpose" comments, because that's what happens on these videos. Now the truth is, I'm really happy with the Soldano too, but I'm even happier to know that with some careful adjustments, I can get the Valve King to sound almost exactly like it. And here's the frequency response graphs to prove it. Look closely. Frequency's at the bottom, sound pressure level is at the left. Soldano's red and the Valve King is green. We see a few deviations, but not much of any significance. Remember, for recording, we are primarily concerned with what's between 100 Hz and 10 kilohertz. The biggest difference I see here is at 100 Hz. The Soldano has more, which means you're gonna have to EQ that down to make room for the bass guitar, so keep that in mind. Now, the reason I can do this test and see what's going on is because of this one critical tool, the United Studio Technologies Replay Box. It's the cleanest, most awesome reamp device I've ever come across, and is designed by Chad Kelly, the man who created the Signal Art reamp. Now, I was introduced to that by James Murphy, formerly of Obituary, Testament, and Death, and after much prodding by me, Chad perfected the design. That design is now available here as the United Box, and it's simply incredible. It is my first choice for reamping, and reamping has helped me destroy so many guitar myths over the years because it allows us to isolate only one variable in a test. No longer does the guitar player's performance become a wildcard. This can deliver the same performance again and again, and we can measure what's really going on and make choices based on evidence instead of rather just guess. Now in this case, it sure looks like the Valve King is a lot closer to the Soldano than many would care to admit. And I gotta say, even I'm surprised by just how close it is. Like, this is really impressive stuff. And the great thing about reamping is if you manage to screw things up when you're recording a band, or you're just not happy with the recorded sound for whatever reason, you can simply record again without having to perform again. If you're serious about your guitar recordings, this definitely belongs in your toolbox. Now, let's be absolutely clear. The Valve King is a one-trick pony. It's only going to do one sound well. And I'm using it the same way that I would with any amp in the studio, as a head and not as a combo, because generally combos ship with garbage speakers, and the Valve King here is no exception. It may be a Valve King, but it is a speaker fool. And of course, any metal tube amp in the studio is most likely going to have an overdrive in front of it. 5150 Soldano rectifier, it's been common practice to tighten these with an overdrive for recording. There are literally thousands of posts in the Andy Sneap forum about it if you want to go back far enough. What we're doing here is the exact same thing, because this is exactly the kind of setup you'll be working with in a real world recording situation. But I can still imagine the complaints in the comments. That's right, nobody's ever used an overdrive when recording high gain metal tones. I must be out of my freaking mind! You're just skewing the results, Glenn! My end goal isn't to find an amp that can do the high gain metal thing without an overdrive. The end goal is to find an amp that's suitable for recording high gain and not break the bank. I'm looking for a recording situation to help people out there achieve their goals that might not have a lot of money to spare. So where do we find this amp at bargain bin prices? Well, we need to change up the typical guitar player strategy just a tiny bit and not look for the 100-watt head. What we want is the 50-watt combo. This is the exact same strategy I used last year on the 6505 Plus video, where I found one for only 325 bucks. Same thing here. And you don't have to look very hard to find some deals. If you spend 5 minutes on a search, well, here's one for 264. Here's another for 323. And here's some greedy bastard charging $549. Dude, are you out of your fucking mind? Okay, everybody, don't pay that kind of money for one. Anything over $350 is pushing it, and $549, well, that's completely insane. Come to Crazy Larry's Used Guitar Gear Emporium, where you'd have to be out of your freaking mind to pay these prices. We've got used PV Valve Kings for you. Everybody gets a used PV Valve King for only $549. That's right, no credit check required. Just sign your name on the dotted line and get ready to pay. Unfortunately, you're not dumb enough to fall for that kind of bullshit, and you'll exercise a little bit of patience when hunting down used gear. Patience, I find, is the key to getting the best deals possible. You do a little homework and possibly a short road trip, and it can wind up saving you hundreds. For example, here's one for $229 on eBay, and here's one for only $250 Canadian on Facebook Marketplace. That's only $180 US, guys. And that's where I found mine, Facebook Marketplace. This one I got right here, only 250 Canadian dollars. And I found it in the town that's too cheap to buy real amps. Yep, the same place I found the Bujera 1960, Tilbury, Ontario. Home of the Tillbillies, and where dating your cousin isn't frowned upon nearly enough. Yeah, I get it. Facebook is a dumpster fire of horrible negativity, and yet Marketplace is a great spot to find deals because, unlike Reverb and eBay, they don't take a cut. And the Valve King is cheap because it's an amp that most guitar players will scoff at. It's perceived as having little value because the speaker it ships with sounds like shit. However, if you bypass that speaker and plug it into a good cabinet, suddenly this little bastard roars to life and can even keep up with the legendary Soldano. And today, to craft this tone, I'm using one of my all-time favorite affordable guitar cabs, the Harley Benton Vertical Greenback 2x12. It's rated at 50 watts, which is perfect for what this amp can throw out, and it is loud as hell. I love greenbacks because they were the speaker of choice in metal's formative years, but now they're somewhat rarer, so it's far easier to find a tone that stands out from the crowd with one of these because they're not using vintage 30s. This is one of my favorite pieces of affordable gear, and at only $347, it is priced within reach of many players. In fact, the all-in cost for this entire rig, amp, and cabinet is only $530. And at only 42 pounds, there's far less chance of throwing your back out than by lugging around a fully loaded 4x12. Now, if you're wondering, 50 watts for an amp is plenty of power. Volume is determined not by the amp's output, but by the speaker's sensitivity rating. Yep, it's down to those damn pesky speakers again. Now in this case, greenbacks are rated at 96 decibels, meaning with 1 watt of power at 1 meter distance, the speaker output will be 96 decibels. And on the loudness scale, that puts it between a hairdryer and a helicopter. And that's with only 1 watt! Bigger power amps mean more headroom and not always more volume. Now, there are a few caveats with this Valve King. In this case, the amp tends to crap out when you push the volume past the 11 o'clock position because there's not a lot of headroom. But for studio recording, this works fine because the object is to get the speakers moving and not tear your ears off. And I'd also recommend not running the treble past the noon position either, because this EQ gets nasty. To my ears, the sweet spot is way back around the 10 o'clock position, and it's quite pleasant there. Just remember to have music playing when you're dialing in your tone. I did a video on this strategy called Why Your Guitar Sounds Like Shit in a Mix, and I'll have a link to that video at the end of this one. If you're struggling getting your tone to translate into a recording situation, I would highly, highly recommend watching it. All right, let's do this test one more time, and you tell me what you like, amp A or amp B on rhythms and leads. I'll reveal which is which at the end of the video. Pretty impressive, huh? Now what I'm using to get these tones is a real special tool, and that is the Lewitt 640 Rex microphone. This is my favorite thing ever for guitars, which is insane because it was designed for kick drums. Now when I'm miking up cabs, I usually use two mics, a dynamic and a condenser. This has both of those elements built right in, but they're perfectly in phase, so I don't have to mess around and I can save time on setup. It's really cool too when you combine these things, like check out the dynamic versus the condenser. Now, when we combine the two, we get something really cool. But when we flip the phase, this is where it gets interesting. That horrible hollow sound, that's what's being taken away from the guitar. And we do that so we have to spend less time mixing. This is what I would call the ultimate convenience mic. If you record a lot of guitar, you should really check one of these out over at lewitt.com. It is simply awesome. So, who exactly is this amp for? Well, if you're trying to open a studio and get clients through the door, this isn't exactly going to be a big draw. Oh, come pay me $75 an hour to record through a Valve King? That doesn't exactly have a good ring to it. If you're running a studio, the client bands are paying for access to gear that they don't have. There's nothing wrong with having a Valve King, but if you want to hook clients, expensive tube amps and impressive mixing consoles are the way to go. Sorry about your wallet, bro. And don't forget, you're going to have endless fun trying to get the bands to pay for studio time regardless. If you want to record bands, that's absolutely fine, but if you want to earn a living, you'd better be open to doing soundtracks for dog food commercials. And sadly, inflation is making a lot of high-end amps like the Soldano out of reach for many people. Amp modelers are fantastic, but there's a good chance that you're going to sound like everyone else with that modeler because the sound is not in the hands. In recording, it's in the speaker and the microphone, or the amp sim and impulse. And if your guitar player is going on and on about his pickups and how great they make his guitar sound, have him watch this. Yeah, that is the Dynamount robotic mic arm. I've been working with them for years because their product is simply one of the best guitar recording tools ever conceived. We used to have to run back and forth, sit at the mix position, make an observation, run out to the studio, adjust the mic, repeat ad nauseum, and hope for the best. Now with the Dynamount, I can use an app on my phone to adjust the mic position and really tweak the sound in a way that's going to have a significant impact. Dynamount also has the new lower cost V2R model, which has side-to-side motion as well as angle motion. And what's more, if you use the code SPECTRA, you'll get $50 off the V2R. If you record a lot of guitar, the Dynamount is simply invaluable. It is the killer app for miking up guitar cabinets. Get one today so you can stop guessing and get the results you've been after. Of course, I always get some comment from a wannabe smartass. If the Valve King's so great, why don't you just sell your Soldano? Well, despite all the evidence provided here, the tests, the frequency response graphs, this video will have literally zero effect on the value of the Soldano. It's got too much mythology around it. and perceived value has a vast effect on real world value. And that is why people stupidly pay $10,000 for a used amp. Now let's be clear here, I'm not trying to undermine the Soldano owner. I'm trying to illustrate to the struggling home studio owner that you probably don't need to drop megabucks on a tube amp when you can get very similar results for less than $200. Because I wish somebody had been out there when I was younger pointing this stuff out. Instead, I've dropped thousands of dollars on the wrong things that did not give me the results I was after. My goal was to get a great metal tone on recording, and all the forums had me looking at converters and vacuum tubes. They convinced me that I was going to have to spend $5,000 on a set of Lavery converters to get a decent guitar tone. And I was ready to spend that money too. But thankfully, I found the Andy Sneap forum and I heard guys getting incredible tones with budget converters. And that sent me down this giant rabbit hole of actually figuring out what the hell makes a guitar sound work in a mix. It's not the badge on the amp. It is the mic you use and the speaker that creates the sound. That's where the rubber hits the road, and it's what matters most when you press that record button. So I think we can put this one on the SMG Hidden Gems list with a few caveats. As of right now, the Val King 50-watt combo would be ranked at number 3, number 2 being the Bugera 1960, and number 1 being the 6505 Plus combo. As long as you dial this amp in carefully, you can get a truly great recording with it. Just be cautious with that treble and volume knob. Neither of those like to be put past the 12 o'clock position, and sound better dialed back just a bit. If you've got one of these kicking around at home and haven't been able to get good results with it, try plugging it into a better cabinet and try these settings. You'll be shocked at what this amp can really produce. Not an exact match to a Soldano, but it is surprisingly very close. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that your cheap amp is holding you back. The amp isn't the issue. It's your recording skills. Practice placing your microphone, get a reamp box, and take notes. And most of all, keep working on your skills because you will get better. Now, I'm going to keep searching for killer deals on great amps that may have flown under the radar. And of course, I'm always open to your suggestions, and I've already got quite a list put together. If you found the video useful, make sure you subscribe because I'm going to keep making videos like this and show you how to get great results for not a whole lot of money. It's a great time to be a home recording engineer. All you need is a good cabinet and a little knowledge, because with knowledge, you can even make a lowly Valve King combo sound great. Be sure to check out the video Why Your Guitar Sounds Like Shit in a Mix right here, and it'll show you the right strategies to employ to get better results in your recordings. I went behind Marshall's back to bring you the truth. Marshall amps will cost you thousands, but I found a real tube amp that rivals a vintage Marshall Plexi, and it only cost me $256. Let me show you how to find one and how it stacks up against the real thing. And make no mistake, this amp does the crank Marshall sound without the insane price tag. I stumbled across this article in my newsfeed the other day. A quote from Marshall's new CEO about winning guitarists back. Oh, for crap's sakes, you did it to yourself! Okay, I get it, Marshall. You're out of touch with the people that you're trying to reach. Here's a couple of hints. Number 1, nobody buys Guitar World magazine anymore. And number 2, nobody can afford your amps! Even on the used market, they are out of reach. Like, here's one for $5,000. Here's another one for $4,000. Look, this one's $3,650. And wow, here's a bargain at only $2,700. Hell, you can get a brand new one at Sweetwater for only $24.99. Wow, with those prices, why not get 3? Ever notice how guitarists love to waste money on expensive amps that they don't need? It's like a badge of honor for them. Hey, look at my shiny new $5,000 amp. It sounds just like the $500 one, but I'm $4,500 poorer, and the credit card companies are going to make a lot of money off me. Seriously, guys, is it the sound that you're after or just the bragging rights? Oh, who am I trying to kid? Of course it's the bragging rights. If guitar players ever stop talking about themselves, they might put more time into writing something someone would want to listen to more than once. And if you listen to all the amazing indie metal going on these days, it's obvious that's not going to change anytime soon. Sadly, if you're a younger person, these amps are going to be out of reach. And it's not your fault, the system has been stacked against you. Rent has gone through the roof, work from home is ending, so you'll have to pay for the privilege of driving to work so you can do the same job you can do from your kitchen, and the only chance you're ever gonna have of owning a home is by inheriting one, thanks to Airbnb turning all the available housing into short-term rentals. I think it's safe to say that your generation got screwed. And if you want to play guitar, your options are going to be limited at best. In other words, no Marshall for you. Finance it, you say? Yeah, that's not really such a great idea, especially since you're already spending the rest of your life paying off your student loan for a bullshit diploma that did not get you a job in your field. What possible harm could come from even more debt? However, hope is not lost. There are still some killer deals out there, because in the recording world, the badge on the amp does not matter. The dollar signs attached to that amp do not matter. And the opinions of your friends who play guitar really don't matter. The only thing that matters is what's coming out of the speakers. Can you record the sound that the band wants? Can you get a sound across the speakers that you're going to be proud of? Now, I've dropped tens of thousands of dollars into my amp collection, and after many years of failure, learned the hard way that the ultimate deciding factor on your guitar sound is the speaker that the amp's going through. I've made a few videos detailing this and shown examples of what's really going on, much to the fury of the online guitar community. A community that's obviously spent a lot of money on their amps and doesn't take too kindly to being shown that their expensive toys might not be everything that they've been led to believe. My goal here isn't to make those people feel good about their purchases. My goal is to help you get the best bang for your buck because you're probably struggling just to get by. Last year, I found the ultimate deal on a high-gain amp, the 6505 Plus combo. I got mine for only $325. Essentially, it's a 60-watt 5150 that sounds amazing once you plug it into some good speakers rather than the PV shitfield that it comes with. Color me shocked, but did you know that amps following the same basic design might sound similar? No, really! Look, I get it. The shiny chrome plating and different knobs look different, and they might even sound different at whatever shithole dive bar your band is playing at for an audience of literally tens of people. But when they're mic'd up and they're run through a mix, it's pretty surprising just how similar a lot of these amps sound. Now let me be very clear. I am not saying all amps sound the same. The people who get angry about those videos are usually the ones who misquote me and are upset about things that I never actually said. But not you. You're too smart for that shit. You're paying attention and realize that sniffing glue might not be the wisest lifestyle choice. But I did find that a dual rectifier and a 5150 can sound very similar because both are based off the Soldano circuit. Here's a hint, guys. All you gotta do is turn up the mid-range on the rectifier and boom, you are sounding very close to a 5150. Yeah, I know, turning up the mid-range on a dual rectifier is against the rules because reasons, but if you own one of these amps, you might not need to purchase the other. Try turning the EQ knobs instead. You'll be amazed at what they can do for a whole lot less money than a brand new amp. So what does all of this have to do with Marshall? Simple. Marshalls don't sound like 5150s, and if you're running a home studio, you might want to work from a broader palette. Now, I'm going to be honest here, for the longest time, I just did not get the Marshall thing. I remember being a teenager in the 80s and plugging into a brand new JCM 800 in my local store and thinking, is this it? This sounds like shit. And I've had 800s come into the studio over the years and I've just fucking hated them. To me, they've always sounded thin and wimpy, and the EQ did two things: jack and shit. The JCM 900 was a slight improvement, but again, I really didn't care for it. I did a punk record with one and it was okay, but I never thought I'd actually use it on anything unless somebody insisted on it. The first tube amp I ever bought was the Mesa Dual Rectifier, which was much more my speed. But it wasn't until much later that I upgraded my speakers and really got my head around what actually mattered with recorded guitar sound. But sadly, this didn't really have any effect on my opinion on Marshalls. I'd seen too many gigs, too many band practices, and been part of too many recording projects where Marshalls were used and the guitar sound was underwhelming. which is absolutely insane when you consider how many of my favorite records were recorded with Marshalls, like every single Judas Priest record before Defenders of the Faith, records I absolutely adore like British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, and Sad Wings of Destiny. AC/DC used Marshalls, Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Deep Purple, and Van Halen all used Marshalls. But they weren't using the JCM 800 on those classic studio albums, they were using the ones that came before them, like the JMP Super Lead and the Plexis. And to get them to sound good, they had to be played at ear-splitting volume. Now, for example, when Judas Priest did their first appearance on the BBC, they were told they had to turn down or they weren't going to be able to play. And if you watch this performance, the band is really struggling to belt out rock and roll with their emasculated guitar sound. Now, legend has it, the TV crew were handing out earplugs to the audience, and if you look closely, they placed carpet in front of the cabinets in some lame attempt to quiet things down. What a bunch of wimps! And who the hell was this host? Like, did the BBC say, let's try and find the lamest guy possible to host this thing? Now, fortunately, between songs when nobody was looking, the guys managed to turn the amps back up, and we got a slightly better performance of Dreamer Deceiver. But that was the thing. Those amps needed to be driven hard to get the sustain. And driving those amps hard has certainly not hurt my record collection. So a few years ago, I was at Warren Hewitt's studio, and I finally got to plug into a JMP. And it became a case of, oh, now I get it. This amp I like. Might be cool to get one of these for the studio one day. So how do we get this classic sound and not go completely bankrupt? Simple. We look for the forbidden brand, Bajera. Now let's not mince words here. Marshall is not the company it once was. Instead of creating badass amps, they've taken a page from the Gibson How to Ruin Your Rock and Roll Icon Status playbook and become a fashion brand. I recently traveled to Asia and I didn't see many Marshall amps, but I did see an awful lot of young people wearing Marshall headphones. And the amps that they are making these days, well, I tried the code when it came out. Yeah, maybe you should stick to making headphones, Marshall. Apparently that's the only thing you're good at these days. You want to win us back? Build something great that we can afford! Meanwhile, Bajera, a subsidiary of Behringer, makes cheap copies of great amps. And that's been Behringer's business model. Find something great, rip off the design, and get it built in China where things like patents really don't mean much. And we've seen this in product after product. Sometimes they're great and sometimes they're fucking horrible, like the Clark Technic Pultec style EQ from yet another Behringer subsidiary. I reviewed one a few years ago and well, the results were... Interestingly enough, Behringer just copied the classic Neve 33609 compressor and will be selling it for only $500. And you can bet that I'm going to be reviewing it here on this show. However, on my search for great cheap amps, I was having a conversation with my good friend Max Cochet, the guy who recommended the 6505 combo to me, and he suggested that I have a look at the Bajera 1960, a straight up ripoff of the Marshall Plexi. So I went looking on Facebook Marketplace and found one for only 300 Canadian dollars, just a half hour down the road in Tilbury, Ontario. Oh man, you guys ever see the show Letterkenny? Yeah, I swear most of those characters were based off the residents of Tilbury. It's about as redneck as it gets in Canada, and the population is affectionately known as Tillbillies.
Pump the brakes. You take your shirt off, but leave your sunglasses on.
What sort of backwards fucking pageantry is that?
But hey, if you do the math, 300 Canadian dollars is only 259 US dollars. That's for a full-blown tube amp that puts out 150 watts. Deal of the century? It just might be. Now, according to the guy I bought it off, he bought it used as well, and it was missing the faceplate when he got it. Apparently, the original purchaser was so proud of his amp that he removed the logo. And that really doesn't surprise me. I've played gigs with Tillbillies, I've recorded Tillbillies, and I'm sure he got teased to death by his buddies. Oh, how are you now? Too cheap to get a real Marshall, eh? Check out all those awesome records made with Bajeras, eh? Look out, here comes that big rock and roll spinner and his big rock and roll amp. The reason this amp is so cheap is because guitar players listen with their eyes and hear based on logos. However, if you stop acting like a guitar player and start using your brain, you'd realize that there really isn't much different about these. The circuit is not difficult to replicate. There's a ton of Marshall clones on the market these days that are absolutely fantastic. Friedman, Sierra Tone, Germino, and you can even get a DIY kit from Mojotone. But the Bajera is priced at a whole different level because the internet is littered with dumbass comments like this.
Glad you like it. Never played a Bajera and I probably never will.
Hey man, I'm really glad that you'll never lower yourself to play a Bugera. It certainly keeps the prices low for the rest of us. Now, try and keep this in mind when you're shopping for used gear. Look on Facebook Marketplace first. They don't charge percentages on ads. Both Reverb and eBay will take a cut of the sale price, so deals are much harder to find in those places as the percentage is usually built into the cost. I don't know if you're going to find one this cheap, but there are some pretty decent prices out there, like this one for $385, and here's one for $450. I'd recommend clicking on the make an offer button and see if he's willing to deal, but there are some out to lunch prices as well. Like $625 is way too much. And this guy is out of his fucking mind asking for $1,100. My advice, don't pay anything over $450. Stay local if you can and save on shipping, because sometimes even a day trip up a highway can be worth it for a great amp at a great price. Now, a word of caution, Bugera does have a reputation for poor quality in the online forums. How much of that is based on reality and how much of that is disinformation coming from the guys who paid full price for a brand name amp is unverified. But apparently the Infinium series is of higher quality, and that's what I've got right here. According to the serial number, it's 9 years old, and I've been running it full blast here in the studio for the last few weeks with zero issues at all. So how does this Bugera stand up against a real Marshall? Well, I was lucky enough to borrow a 1976 JMP as well as a studio vintage 20-watt combo. I'd like to thank Brandon Blanchett as well as Walter Riggy for helping make this episode happen. Normally, this is where I would reach for one of the most important tools I have in the studio, the Signal Art Reamp Box. However, as many of you have pointed out, they're no longer available. But we've got something brand new here on Spectre Sound, a world premiere in fact. This is the brand new replay box from United Studio Technologies. Now this is the exact same circuit as the Signal Art Reamp box, but now it's available worldwide at your favorite music gear retailers. This is what I've used to bust so many guitar myths in here, because reamping allows us to use the same performance and isolate whatever variable we want to test. In this case, an extremely affordable tube amp versus a couple of rock classics that are just plain out of reach for so many of us. Now the replay box has got all the great things that I love about the Signal Art, plus it's got 2 harmonic modes which were only available as separate units with the Signal Art. All that is combined here into one box, and it absolutely delivers the goods. Follow my affiliate links in the description below and get yours today so you can bust your own myths. All right, let's check out these amps. So what did you guys think? Which amp sounded best? With the labels removed, does the more expensive amp still have its perceived value? And should you be paying thousands for an amp that might not offer that much of a sonic benefit, especially when recording? Now bear in mind, if you have an ethical issue here, Bugera is not making the 1960 anymore. So if you find one on the used market, the money is not going to Behringer and supporting them ripping off other brands. And on a personal note, after doing high gain for decades, I'm realizing that maybe I don't need that much gain all the time. An important part of being a producer is not being fearful of trying something new. It's about coming to grips with the fact that you're not an expert at all things, and the learning never stops. You have to put the project before your own ego. Audio engineering is a journey, not a destination. In the auto industry, we learned the term Kaizen from the Japanese, meaning continuous improvement. And this is how we grow both as musicians and as engineers. On a related note, I saw a video with Billy Corgan once, and he was recalling hanging out with Edward Van Halen. He asked to try his amp and then asked, "Where's your distortion pedal?" To which Van Halen replied, "What distortion pedal?" And Corgan cranked up the amp and was blown away by the sound. I had a similar experience a few years ago at the first GitCon. Pete Thorne had all of us play the first thing that came to mind, playing through a cranked plexi. The whole experience was a bit like riding a bull. It's very different from the modern high-gain super precise thing. You have to play differently. And the big takeaway for me anyway was that I immediately heard the sound that I had heard on so many records. And the speaker that I've heard on so many of these records, the Celestion Greenback. I love doing these videos and turning you on to affordable recording gear that delivers great results without costing a bloody fortune. Now, the Bugera 1960 at $257 is pretty damn impressive, But I've paired it with something really special, which is getting such good results. And that is the Harley Benton Vertical 2x12 loaded with greenbacks. A lot of your favorite classic rock and metal records used two things: plexi amps and greenback speakers. Now, greenbacks are interesting because they're only 25 watts, but they can handle a whole lot more power. One of the reasons Edward Van Halen had such a signature sound was how the greenbacks reacted when they were pushed to their limits. Now, this cabinet here is only rated at 50 watts, but the amp is rated at 150 watts. And guess what? I've run it full blast without any issues. Now, I'm not saying to go run 300 watts into one of these cabs for 12 hours straight. You might run into some problems there. But here in the studio, demoing for just a few minutes, the cabinet handled 150 watts dimed with no master volume in the circuit, and it certainly held its own against these much more expensive Marshalls. The Harley Benton Vertical 2x12 is one of my favorites for budget gear, not only because it's only $347, but because it mounts Celestion greenback speakers instead of the much more common Celestion Vintage 30. I wish more metal guitar players would consider using greenbacks for their recordings. They might just sound a little bit different from everyone else, which would be a really nice change of pace. All right, let's see how these vintage Marshalls are worth thousands more than a Bugera. At least I'm sure we'll read more than a few excuses feebly attempting to explain why that is in the comments. Let's roll it. Isn't it amazing how we hear things differently with the labels removed? And then when we add them back, our perception changes yet again. Keep that in mind when looking for your next amp. It might just save you thousands. That's it for today. Now fuck off. I went behind Marshall's bracket T490. This one's okay. Oh, wow. Sadly, if you're a younger person, for much of a sonic benefit. Fuck. Like the BBC, like what are the fuck? I'm surrounded by guitar amps worth tens of thousands of dollars, but I found an amp that will rival any one of these, and it only cost me $325. I'm going to show you guys how to find one and how well it stacks up against the best of what I've got back here. Make no mistake, this amp is an absolute monster. Now, if you're starting out in guitar, have you ever asked yourself, what amp do I get? There's so many choices out there and countless tube amps that sound incredible. The only problem is they're really, really expensive. If you're in the market for your first amp, it can all seem just a little bit overwhelming. For example, my first tube amp was a Mesa Dual Rectifier, which I bought way back in 2000. And I scrimped and saved every spare penny I could put together to be able to afford it. And back then it cost somewhere around $1,500. These days, a new one will set you back a paltry $2,800.
You got me shitting me!
Now, given the fact that in that time inflation has increased, the cost of living has increased, but wages have not, does this mean that great amps are out of reach for normal people? Well, the one amp that I've recommended for years for anybody looking for their first truly amazing amp is, of course, a used PV5150. Edward Van Halen's signature amp was made by the thousands and used to be super affordable on the used market. I got mine in 2005 for a whopping $600 Canadian. That's only $438 in US funds. And don't be fooled by that cheap price. The 5150 wound up on countless metal classics, including Carcass's Heartwork, Machine Head's Burn My Eyes, In Flames Clayman, and just about everything in the whole modern mental, whatever the hell you want to call it these days. Unfortunately, since the passing of Edward Van Halen in 2020, the price of a 5150 on the used market has increased to more than double of what they used to be. And if you're after one of the original block letter models, well, it'd probably help if you're super rich. So, what's the prospective player to do? Is there anything out there that's affordable and awesome? You bet there is. In 2005, Van Halen left PV, and with him, so did the 5150 name. However, PV rebadged their amps to the 6505 without changing the circuitry. And because of that, the same amp can be found on the used market for some extremely reasonable prices. But how do we find one for around $325? Look for the 6505 combo. They pack 60 watts of pure tube power and come with a single 12-inch speaker. Now make no mistake, this will rival the 5150 head that is going for thousands on the used market. But because of one tiny little change to the badge, they are ignored by the slime balls looking to make a fast buck off the Van Halen name, meaning that you can grab an amazing tube amp for dirt cheap. And I do mean dirt cheap. Here's one for $375, another $475, $450, and yet another for $375. Make sure to look for the 1x12 version and not the 2x12, which for some strange reason is going for a lot more money. However, the sad truth is the Sheffield speaker that the amp ships with is terrible, so we're not going to be using it. Also, please be on the lookout for scammers trying to pass off upgraded versions where they replace the stock vacuum tubes with ones made from the elusive combination of magical fairy dust and unicorn farts. To be clear, the entire tube replacement for your amp business is at best completely dishonest. New tubes are not going to revoice your amp. If the tubes in your amp are working, then they're the best ones for that amp. Make no mistake, new tubes are a very expensive rabbit hole to go down that will offer very little in the way of sonic benefit. But hey, they sure look cool when they glow! In past episodes, I've demoed a number of affordable combo amps on the show, and I haven't had much luck with them, mainly because they all... So what sets the 6505 combo apart? Simple. Most combos are limited by the terrible speaker that they ship with, and the 6505 combo is no exception. However, this amp has one major difference. You can easily disconnect the speaker and plug in something better, and this makes it function just like any of these amp heads back here, except this head I found for only $325. So let's hook this up to my Engel 4x12 loaded with some of those brand new vintage 30s, the new generation that Celestion finally got right. Oh yeah, that is what I am talking about. This is the 6505 combo. Just a little bit off camera here, and this is what I've got it dialed into. Now I do have this thing wired into a very good cabinet. I've got it wired into an Engel 4x12 with a couple of those amazing new 2022 vintage 30s from Celestion. Yes, the new ones made in China sound absolutely fucking amazing these days, as evidenced by the tone you're hearing. And that's the thing. Even though you get a great amp, it's still going to be filtered by that speaker, and that's something a lot of us don't take into account because speakers are hidden behind grill cloths, so we really don't think about them all that much. However, I gotta say, yeah, as far as amps go, this thing really does deliver the goods. I mean, I've got no problems with volume, I've got no problems with tone, gain, any of that. It's just great. Yeah, that just makes me really happy. The sound of this amp, the fact it only cost me $325 US. Now I know I showed you guys a bunch of screenshots around $375, $425, something like that. I got lucky on the low end for $325. I know these things are going pretty cheap in Europe too as well. So if you guys are watching in England, Germany, France, all those wonderful countries like that, keep your eyes peeled. But yeah, they definitely delivered the goods. Now I promised you guys at the beginning of the video, I was going to show you how this stacks up against the best I got back here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up against a 5150 original signature series from the mid 90s. And I'm also going to show you how it stacks up against the granddaddy of them all, the Soldano. So I'm going to play the same riff and I'm going to run them back to back here. Check this out. Now, don't get me wrong, I am definitely hearing some differences between those three amps. The Signature Series 5150 seems maybe a little bit more mid-rangey, a little bit boxy, and that's what I found myself fighting a lot on a lot of my clients' records in, say, like the mid-2000s was exactly that sort of thing. The Soldano, on the other hand, is a very nice, almost kind of a scoop mid-range thing going on, even though I cranked the crap out of the mids on that amp. But this guy right here, the 6505 combo, damn, something really cool is going on with this thing. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess out there that a lot of you guys watching right now might not have extra room for a full-size 4x12 cabinet or something soundproof enough to be able to crank the crap out of it or a jam space or anything like that. I get it. Rent is fucking expensive these days, and nobody's going to fault you for that. So let's try something here. Let's plug the 6505 into a 2-notes Torpedo Captor X, and I'm going to run it through those free impulse responses I gave back a couple weeks ago and just see how well this would be suited towards desktop recording. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I've got the Torpedo X hooked up and I am not running any kind of cabinet at all. I'm just going straight out of the amp into the Focusrite Red 16 line, and it is doing the job very well. This is a sound I would be more than happy to put on a client's record because it really does the thing. Yeah, that's what I mean. That is so thick. It's got such a glorious attack on it. And once again, I only paid $325 for this amp. So if you're plugging into a cabinet, if you're plugging in directly to record, if you've got something cool like a captor kicking on or any kind of load box, this is definitely going to fit the bill. It all really comes down to a question of having a good impulse response or a speaker to run it through. Now, of course, that can get expensive, but again, with impulses, it can be pretty damn cheap. And I am going to tell you right now, I am running to a very special impulse response loader, something that might be coming up near the end of the month from Spectre Digital that I think you guys are really going to like. We'll have more on that, obviously, the closer we get to the end of the month, if all goes well. For a straight up to right to desk recording system, yeah, I think the 6505 Plus really delivers the good. So when running this combo against an original Signature 5150, I gotta be honest, kind of like the combo a little bit better. Just seems to have a certain savageness to the attack. So there's obviously been some tweaks made to the preamp section. But rather than speculate, I reached out to the amp's original creator, Mr. James Brown, and here's what James had to say.
Regarding the original 5150 changes to get the original 5150 212 combo, Ed was unhappy with the feel of the attack when reducing the power to 60 watts. And in the tweaking process, I tightened up the attack by making a couple of small changes so it's chunkier. He immediately got very excited and asked, "Why didn't you show me that tweak when designing the first amp, the block letter?" I said, "Because once you said it was right, I quit fucking with it." Afterwards, he asked for a head with the same mod, and I built one. He used that modded head on the balance record, and it ultimately defined the lead tone for all the rest of the amps, including the 5152, EVH 5153s, and the later PV 6505 Plus, and the newest 6505 2. However, as far as I know, the 6505 is just like the OG block letter with the looser, thicker attack. When I joined EVH and designed the new 5150 Iconic, I did the burn switch that gives the amp some of that thicker sound of the block letter, although it's a little bit tighter.
James, thanks so much for answering my questions, and whatever you did, it sure sounds great. I've been extremely impressed with this, not only by using it on its own, but in a recording situation as well. Check this out. Yeah, that really sounds great. Once again, I gotta stress this, we are not using the included Sheffield speaker because the tone is ultimately defined by the speaker, and the one that they included with this amp is an atrocity. So for all you guitar players out there in the market for an awesome amp but you don't have a lot of money to spend, start by looking for a 6505 combo. Just be aware that you're still going to need a cabinet for it, just like any other amp head. For a budget solution, I'd recommend the Harley Benton 2x12. It comes with a pair of vintage 30s and it only costs $249. That means you can get a beast of a rig for under $600. That's going to be loud enough for the stage, studio, and even loud enough to keep up with your idiot drummer at practice. By the way, guys, the new vintage 30s being made in China are nothing short of incredible. That's what I've been running the guitar through all this time. If you like the tone, be sure to grab my free impulse response. The link is in the description below. And if you want to see a deep dive into the new vintage 30s, you can check out this video right here. And if you found the video useful and you'd like to see more of these videos where I uncover hidden gems and how to get great sounds for budget prices, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I'm almost at 500,000 subscribers and I need your help to make that happen. Thanks very much, and make sure you check out the Vintage 30 video.